My name is Sera Kline, and I don't believe in ghosts. Not spirits, not curses, not gods in the woods. But I do believe in stories, and how far people will go to make them real. I'm a field researcher with the Folklore and Ritual Studies Department at Elmbrook University. My job is to document oral traditions, rites, and beliefs, especially in isolated communities. Marrow's Hollow was supposed to be my final thesis project, an untouched mountain village known for its seasonal rituals and their strict silence around outsiders. They didn't even have a working phone number, just one letter of invitation, handwritten, signed only Bram. I arrived just before sunset, though I couldn't be sure of the time. My watch had stopped ticking somewhere along the mountain road, and the GPS had died an hour earlier. No signal, no internet, nothing but trees and fog and the faint sound of gravel under tires. The sign at the village border was crooked, barely visible. Marrow's Hollow. Let silence keep you. I got out of the car with my bag, my notebook, and too much caffeine in my bloodstream. I expected welcome committees or suspicion. Either would have made sense. But the village was quiet, still, like it had been holding its breath for years. A man greeted me at the edge of the path, late 50s maybe, with sharp eyes and a lantern. He introduced himself as Elder Bram. "You'll be staying in the archivist's house," he said. "No one's lived there in many years, but it remembers how." His voice had that edge of ritual to it, words chosen carefully, like he wasn't just speaking for himself. He walked me down a path lined with unlit lanterns. No street lamps, no cars, no sound. Just before we reached the house, he paused and looked at me, very directly. "One rule, Miss Kline. After the sun dips behind the peak, do not open your door. Not for anyone, not for anything." I blinked. Why? His expression didn't change. "We never open the door after 9. Then he handed me the key and walked away. The house was made of stone and timber, warm enough, old enough to creak with every movement. Inside were sparse furnishings, a fireplace, and shelves of preserved herbs. No clocks, no mirrors. And when I plugged in my phone, the screen stayed black, dead. I unpacked my journal, my field recorder, and a folder full of blank forms. I was here to study ritual behavior, to observe, to document, not to get spooked by local legends. But something about the silence here didn't feel like peace. It felt like something waiting. That night, just as I was drifting off in front of the fire, 3 knocks. Soft, deliberate, at my door. I sat up, unsure I'd heard anything at first. Then again, 3 more knocks, slower this time, heavier. I stepped toward the door. Every floorboard groaned under my feet. "Hello," I called through the wood. "Is someone there?" Nothing. No footsteps, no voice. Just a stillness that settled over the room like dust. I placed my hand on the latch and stopped. Something about the air had shifted, colder, thicker, like it was pressing in around me. I didn't open it. Not that night. Later, as I lay in bed trying to forget the knocking, I heard something even stranger. A humming, faint but close. A woman's voice, low and familiar. She was humming the lullaby my mother used to sing when I was a child. But my mother has been dead for 8 years. I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid there, wide-eyed in the dark, with the hum of that lullaby echoing in the quiet long after it stopped. I told myself it was just in my head, memory tricks, the brain pulling sounds from somewhere deeper, but it felt too close, like breath on the back of my neck. Morning, the house was cold again. The fire had long since gone out, and my fingers were stiff from holding my recorder all night like it could protect me. It hadn't picked up anything, just static. Outside, the village looked unchanged. The fog had lifted slightly, enough to reveal the scattered cottages, the worn cobblestone paths, the central well. But still, no sounds, no birds. Even the wind moved quietly here. I made my way to the gathering hall Bram had pointed out yesterday, a long wooden building near the center of the village. A few people passed me along the way. They didn't speak. Most didn't meet my eyes. One woman, older, bundled in thick black layers in a shawl that dragged behind her, just stood completely still as I walked by, staring at me like she knew me, like she'd been waiting for me. Inside the hall was warmer, filled with candles, even though it was broad daylight. Elder Bram stood near the back, sorting through a pile of parchment scrolls. Yes, scrolls. They looked aged and brittle, like they'd crumble if I breathed wrong. "You didn't open your door, did you?" he asked without turning. "No," I said, "but someone knocked." He paused, then nodded once, as if that was expected. "They always knock for the first time on the first night." "Who?" I asked. "Who knocks?" "That depends," he said softly, "on who you are." I asked him about the ritual records, the ones I'd come to study. He gestured to a small writing desk stacked with journals. No dates, no titles, just names, dozens of them, each in careful black ink. I flipped through one at random. Handwritten notes, descriptions of what people wore, symbols I didn't recognize, mentions of the 9th, and once, "She returned again this year, though we burned the last name to keep her from it." As I was leaving the hall, the woman in the black shawl was waiting outside. Up close, her skin was weathered like old bark, eyes clouded but sharp. "You look like her," she said, voice like brittle leaves. "I'm sorry?" "The girl who opened the door. You wear her face, just like she did, just like all of them." She reached out, and before I could move, she touched my cheek, gently, almost kindly. "They made you come back again. Poor thing." Then she turned and walked away, the ends of her shawl dragging over the stones behind her. Back at the house, someone had slipped something under my door. It was a drawing, childish pencil strokes on worn paper. It showed my house, the door, a stick figure standing outside it. The figure's head was blackened out, scribbled until the paper tore. Below it, written in small block letters, "You should not open it." I turned the drawing over. On the back, in a different hand, was a name written over and over again in faded ink. Sera, 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 Sera. But I hadn't told anyone my name. The knocking didn't stop after the first night. It came again the next. Later this time, closer to midnight, I think. Though without a clock, I couldn't be sure. 3 knocks, like before. But then, after a pause, It said my name, not in a voice I recognized, not shouted or whispered, just a low, steady tone, like a name spoken through a wall of water. Sera. And again, softer. Sera. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there at the edge of my room with my back against the wall, heart thrumming like it knew something I didn't. In the morning, the drawing was gone. I hadn't thrown it away, I was sure of that, but it had vanished, along with the small black symbol I'd scratched into my notebook, one of the glyphs from Bram's journal, the one I couldn't stop staring at last night. Now, that page was blank, as if I'd never touched it. I walked the village with more purpose that day, trying to spot patterns. The doors were old, but freshly reinforced, extra wooden beams, newer hinges. Windows were barred from the inside. People spoke to one another in passing, but they grew quiet when I came near. Children were ushered inside, except one boy, maybe 6 or 7, wearing boots too big for him and holding a toy carved from wood. He stood beside a well and stared at me like I'd crawled out of it. "They said your name last night," he told me. "You're not supposed to let them know your name." "Who said it?" I asked. He looked confused, like I was the one not making sense. "The knocking," he said. Then he held out his toy, some kind of figure. I took it. It was carved like a little girl, with lines down her face where eyes should have been. "She gave this back last time," he whispered. "Said she didn't want to come again." Before I could ask what he meant, a woman, his mother maybe, rushed forward, snatched him by the wrist, and pulled him away. She didn't look at me, but she said one thing as she passed: "If you open the door, you let it remember." Back at the house, I recorded everything I could remember. Tried to play back the sound from the night before. I'd left the recorder running, I know I did, but the file was corrupted. All I could hear was a faint hissing, like breathing layered beneath static, until, just for a moment, a voice. Mine. "I want to open the door." I froze. I'd never said that, not aloud, not even in my head, but it was unmistakably my voice. I pulled out one of Bram's ritual journals. I'd meant to skim, but something stopped me on a specific page, one I hadn't marked, hadn't seen. A single sentence, written in ink darker than the others. "The ninth always returns, even if she forgets who she is." And underneath it, in a messy hand that didn't match the rest of the book, Sera Kline. I didn't go to Bram the next morning. I didn't trust him. Not with the way he looked at me. Not with the way my name had appeared in his journal, handwritten beneath a passage that felt too precise, too rehearsed. Instead, I followed the boy, the one from the well. He walked alone, just after dawn, through the narrow footpath behind the central chapel. I kept my distance, careful not to make noise. He ducked between 2 overgrown hedges and disappeared behind a weathered shed. When I reached the gap, I saw a door half buried in the earth, hidden behind vines. A root cellar, or maybe something else. The boy was already gone, but the door was cracked open. Inside was cold. Damp stone walls, dirt floor. The air smelled of rust and something older, like dried flowers and iron. I lit my phone flashlight and stepped down the stairs. What I found was a long, narrow room lined with candles melted into the floor. all burned down to the same level. No wax on the walls, no smoke, just firelight, waiting. And then the wall. It was covered in names, carved, etched, burned, layer upon layer. Some written in looping script, others scrawled in jagged desperation. But I found mine. Not once, not twice, 9 times. Sera Kline, Sera Kline, S. Kline, Sera Kline. Always some variation, dated years apart, decades, all tied together by the same symbol I'd seen scratched in my notebook, the one I didn't remember drawing. At the base of the wall, someone had left something behind, a small cloth pouch tied shut with red thread. I shouldn't have opened it. Inside were teeth, small, white, childlike, and a single ring, plain, copper, engraved on the inner band. Do not return. The door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, spun. No one was there, but I could hear something moving above me. Slow, steady footsteps pacing on the wooden floor. Then, knock, knock, knock on the trapdoor above. No voice this time, just pressure, just presence. It wasn't trying to get in. It was waiting for me to open it. I waited. I counted to 100, then 2. Finally, silence. When I climbed back out, the sky had shifted. It was already late afternoon, but I'd only been inside 20 minutes? That night, I tried to sleep. I tried to forget the wall, the ring, the teeth. But when the knocking returned, I didn't move. Because this time, it didn't say my name. It said, another one. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name I hadn't told anyone since I was 13. The one I stopped using when I left home. Little Sarah May. My mother's voice. I used to believe that if you didn't answer something, if you ignored it long enough, it would stop trying. But the knocking didn't stop. It learned. That night, it wasn't just my mother's voice outside the door. It was hers, yes, but not quite. Something was off. Too smooth, too rhythmic. Like a memory being replayed instead of a person speaking. Sarah May, open the door, baby. It's me. I need you. You always open for me. I sat on the floor with my back pressed to the wood, trying to slow my breathing. Tears stung my eyes, not out of fear, out of something worse, recognition. Whoever, whatever was outside, it knew me. Not just my name. It knew what I missed, what I'd buried, and it was using it. The voice didn't stop until just before sunrise. When I finally dared to look through the front window, the village was waking up, normal, as if no one had heard the voice that haunted my doorway for hours. I confronted Brahm in the chapel. I didn't ask for permission. I slammed the journal down on the altar, open to the page with all the variations of my name. Tell me what this is, I demanded. He didn't even flinch. They're you, he said. They were always you. That doesn't make sense. You think time moves forward here? He asked quietly. You think memory keeps to one path? He led me to a back room I hadn't been allowed to enter before. Inside was a locked cabinet. He opened it with a key he wore on a chain under his shirt. Inside were objects, carefully wrapped in cloth. Bones, a music box, a necklace with a cracked red pendant, photographs that had begun to fade unnaturally. But one object made my knees go weak. A tape recorder. My tape recorder. The exact one I'd brought with me. I found that buried in the woods after the last time, he said. No one else ever returned with anything left. What do you mean, last time? I whispered. He just looked at me. You were the first. You're always the first. And the last. That night, I set the recorder down on the floor in front of the door and pressed record. I needed proof. The knocks began later than usual, almost like it was waiting for me to hit record. 3 knocks, then silence, then... Do you remember the redwoods, Sera? Do you remember how cold it was? My stomach turned, because I did. The redwoods were real, a forest I'd wandered into once as a child, lost for hours, maybe longer. No one had ever known about that. Not my professors, not my friends. You cried when we took your name the first time, the voice whispered. But you never remember, do you? The knocking came again, harder this time. And then, let us finish what you started. The recording picked up all of it. The words, the sound of nails dragging across the door, and something else I hadn't heard in real time. A second voice, faint, familiar. Sera, please don't open. Not again. It was my voice. It's one thing to fear the dark. It's another to hear yourself whispering from the other side of it. I listened to the recording 10 times. Not just to the knocking, not just to the thing wearing my mother's voice, but to mine, my voice from outside the door, begging me not to open it. It didn't make sense. I'd never spoken those words, not into the recorder, not in dreams. But it was me. The same cadence, same slight rasp I get when I'm scared but trying not to show it. And if that voice was outside, then who was inside? I left the house at dawn. Didn't tell Bram. Didn't take the recorder. Just a flashlight, a coat, and the map I'd drawn of the village. There was one place I hadn't been. A house on the edge of Marrow's Hollow. It looked abandoned, partially collapsed, roof caved in. No curtains, no candles, no footsteps in the snow. No one spoke of it. But the day before, I'd heard something. A door creaking, a single knock from that direction. The front door groaned open on its own when I touched it. Inside, ash and rot and the smell of damp wood. But deeper in the house, under a broken staircase, I found it. A second door, newer than the rest of the house, clean, undamaged, out of place. No handle, just a circular hole in the wood, where something could be passed through, like a slot in a confession booth. I crouched down and looked through. Just blackness. But after a few seconds, I heard something move on the other side. Not footsteps, not breathing. A scrape, like stone against stone. Then, without warning, a piece of folded paper slid through the slot. I picked it up. On it was a single sentence, handwritten in red ink. Stop switching sides. That night, I couldn't sleep. I moved the couch in front of the door, pushed the table against it too, left every light on. It still knocked, but this time it didn't speak at all. It just waited for 2 hours. Then, at exactly what felt like 3:12 a.m., it slid something under the door. I didn't touch it at first, but eventually I did. It was a photograph. Me, standing in the woods, wearing the same coat I was wearing right now. But behind me was the thing, shadowed, featureless, tall, but unmistakable. Its hand on my shoulder. My eyes were wide, not with fear, with recognition. I ran to the mirror in the bedroom, stared at my reflection, and for one awful second, I didn't recognize myself. The lines of my face shifted, subtle but undeniable, like something had worn me too many times, and the mask was beginning to tear. I think I've always known how this ends. Not consciously, not clearly, but somewhere deep beneath the years, beneath the logic and the research and the name I chose to wear when I left home, I think I remembered what I opened and who I opened it for. At dawn, the village was already preparing. Lanterns were lit, though it wasn't dark. Offerings were laid out in patterns of ash and salt. Children were kept indoors. No one met my gaze, except Bram. "It's the last night," he said softly. "We tried to change it this time. You were supposed to stay out." "What is it?" I asked. "What's behind the door?" He didn't answer. He only looked at me like someone grieving something that hadn't happened yet. At sunset, they held a gathering in the chapel, but not a service, not a prayer, a silence. Everyone stood, eyes closed, candles in hand, as if waiting for something to arrive or be taken. I didn't stay. I ran. Back to the abandoned house, back to the second door. I had to know, had to see. I pulled the flashlight from my coat, knelt down, and shone it through the slot. At first, nothing. Then, a face. Mine. On the other side of the door. But worn, damaged, wrong. Eyes too hollow. Mouth trembling like it had been whispering for hours. She stared at me, raised a hand, and mouthed something. "Don't open." But the door opened on its own. The light went out. My body pulled forward, not physically, not violently, just inevitably, as if I had always belonged on the other side. I saw glimpses, fragments, 9 versions of me, each one trapped in some cycle, some mask, some borrowed memory. I remembered standing at this very door as a child, with a fever, crying for my mother to come home. I remembered answering her knock, but it hadn't been her. And ever since, it had followed, through names, faces, timelines, looking for the version of me that would bring it through again. Back at my house, I heard the knocking return, louder than ever. But it wasn't at the door. It was inside the walls, knocking to be let out. I never made it to the 8th night, because there is no 8th. Only the return, the reversal, the door that is never truly closed.